Good morning, everyone. Here's your Mormon news update for April 16th, 2025. First, today we're going to start in the church newsroom where it says, Elder Paul Newton has been called a pioneer and a guinea pig, appropriate for the first called senior single male missionary, since the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints recently expanded missionary opportunities for single men 40 and older. And he's starting a pilot program as part of his 12-month service in the Adriatic North Mission. I honestly just love it when the church news uses the words pilot program as if the prophet can't just get revelation about something as important as missionary work. Elder Newton's pioneering journey spans more than just the physical distance from his Salem, Utah residence to the nearby Provo Missionary Training Center and on to the mission office in Zagreb, Croatia. The real journey has been the past half-dozen years, first when hopes and plans for a senior mission with his wife, Kathleen, were dashed by disease and death, followed by the November 1st, 2024 announcement that single senior men could serve, and then the nearly several weeks needed to complete his online application, which required missionary department assistance. He treasures a December 23rd text from Tammy Evans, a project coordinator in the missionary department's Senior Missionary Services Division. You may not know this, but you were the very first single senior elder called. I know it was a process and at times difficult, but you are paving the way for us to be able to fix things and make it better for years to come. On November 1st, 2024, after more than 10 hours in the temple doing ordinance work for the deceased and substituting on a shift, Newton was greeted by texts from family and friends informing him of the church's new allowance for senior single male missionaries and the common question, "What are you going to do?" By the next day, he had contacted a friend who used to work in the missionary department and learned of a possible opportunity. "I'm all in," he told his friend. Newton can rattle off a series of November and December dates, listing stops, stalls, and restarts in his application process. He found encouraging and responsive missionary department advocates in Evans and Sister Suzanne Vaz, a recently released full-time missionary assisting on the division's support team. The latter confided the online missionary systems were being updated, with senior single elder applicants being guinea pigs for the first updates. Newton mentioned that to Elder Lawrence Corbridge, an Emeritus General Authority 70 and former law partner. "Call yourself a pioneer," Elder Corbridge told him. "Guinea pig doesn't sound as nice." Evans told Newton the same thing later in a text. "You are a literal pioneer." Evans salutes Newton for his patience and kindness. "His unwavering desire to serve allowed us to identify and resolve many issues, ultimately improving the process for every single elder who has since submitted a recommendation," she said, adding, "I believe the Lord knew we needed someone like him to walk through this experience first." He remained optimistic, always expressing faith that the Lord would make things work in His timing. I do remember those days when I attributed everything to the Lord. I now find it a lot easier to recognize the accomplishments of people around me and how hard they work to make my life better. The article goes on to say, Adriatic North Mission President Brian E. Cordray's first learnings about senior single elders were that they are to work in mission offices and not be assigned a companion. With missionaries serving in and transferring across 5 southern European countries and crossing international borders for transfer assignments, the mission needs someone to navigate visa processes with a myriad of lawyers and government agencies. Elder Newton, with his unique background as a lawyer, is a godsend for us, President Cordray said. Right, because heaven forbid they actually pay someone to do this legal work. The Lord needs these faithful sons, and frankly, we do too here in the mission field. Even before arriving at the Adriatic North Mission Office on March 21st, Elder Newton was apprised of a special responsibility, which he describes as a pilot program for reactivating non-participating members for both the mission and the church's Europe Central area. To hear President Cordray explain the opportunity, it's an initiative that Elder Newton can understand and appreciate. I wish they had talked more about that pilot program. I'd be interested to see exactly what they're doing to try and get people to come back to church. Speaking of missionaries, let's read this post from Doug Barnett on X that says, "My son is serving as a missionary in Peru for the Church of Jesus Christ. From his letter this morning, I was with Elder Brian in Zapalal 1A for 6 weeks. These are the living conditions. I live in the desert hills. I climb a mountain every day for 7 hours. It's extremely humid and the sun beams on you, so it's extremely hot. At night it doesn't get better because our house acts as an oven. I sweat every night trying to go to sleep. Our electricity turns off all the time. As of the last week, for example, it has gone off 5 of 7 nights and during the day too. My fan almost never works for that reason, but also this causes all of my food to go bad very often. I don't eat often. I eat maybe bread loaves in the morning, and then lunch, and that's it. We don't have water past 8 in the night, and sometimes all through the day. I get attacked every day by dogs. The other day, one really big one attacked me and got my bag and ripped it, and was close to getting me. I get catcalled all day. I get asked out every day and told to do crazy things with them. I am now with a comp from Peru, so I am now in full Spanish all day long, but I am the happiest I have ever been." And then this post from a Facebook group for missionary moms that says, "A few questions. First time mom here and hoping I'm not overreacting. But my son was transferred and the new apartment doesn't have beds. Small, very thin mats on the floor and he is not sleeping. He asked his mission president if they were going to get beds since the apartment was previously a senior couple apartment. The mission president said no and that they are fine to sleep on these thin mats. The senior couple of the mission told my son that this mission president hadn't approved any new beds since being called almost 3 years ago. Am I wrong to think that that is not okay? Also, is it customary for a mission president to not allow them to watch General Conference unless it's in little sessions during their own personal study? If it helps, this is a foreign mission." I'm going to go ahead and guess that the mission president, who receives very generous reimbursements from the church for everything that he has while he's out on his mission, is not sleeping on a thin mat on the floor. Now let's go back to the church news for this article. For the first time in its history, the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defense is permitting members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to be endorsed as chaplains of the British Armed Forces. For more than 200 years, military chaplains have provided spiritual support for His Majesty's Armed Forces in the United Kingdom, offering solace, guidance, and care to service personnel and their families. In early years, the chaplain role was primarily filled by Anglican clergy, but over time, the United Kingdom has authorized more faiths to serve in this capacity. In December 2024, the Ministry of Defense approved the church's application to become an endorsing authority, granting Latter-day Saints the opportunity to now apply to become chaplains of the British Army, the Royal Navy, and the Royal Air Force on a full-time or reserve basis, according to a news release from the church's UK newsroom. Elder Robert F. Schwartz, an Area 70 in the Europe North area, said the church was deeply grateful to the Ministry of Defense for welcoming it as an endorsing authority. If we think of this in the context of our Heavenly Father's work of salvation and exaltation, a chaplain is a minister, someone who works hard to care for the needs of others, he said in the news release. We are confident that His Majesty's Armed Forces will find wonderful ministers in the members of our church who successfully apply to become chaplains. If I had seen this news as a true believing member, I would have thought it was a glorious indicator of how the church was expanding and how it must be true if members were allowed to be chaplains in other countries. Now let's go to the Ex-Mormon subreddit for this post. I had a thought today. Tithing isn't a donation, it's a fee. I was thinking about how some of my success mentors have told me about the importance of giving and how I had given so much money to the church. Then it occurred to me, I wasn't freely giving for the sake of giving. I was giving to maintain my worthy status in the church. I wasn't donating, I was paying my dues. When members don't pay tithing, they 1. Lose their worthy status, 2. Lose their obedient status, 3. Lose their temple privileges, 4. Forfeit blessings from heaven, 5. Risk being burned at the last day. I wasn't donating. I was paying to not lose. Tithing isn't a donation. It's a transaction made to maintain status in the club and fire insurance. I feel like a weight has been lifted off my chest. For the first time in my life, I'm looking forward to contributing to my community for the sake of giving and making some small difference, not to secure my own personal interests. I think that person's right. If you can't go into the temple until you pay, then it's a fee. On a related note, let's read this post from a Latter-day Saint women's support group on Facebook that says, I have a question about fast offerings. I know the rule of thumb is basically what it would cost to feed your family for 2 meals. We have always based this on if we were to take our family out to a restaurant. A few years ago, we were invited to double our fast offerings. We did so and have continued to pay this, even though it is way more than we would actually spend at a restaurant. However, our children are getting older and moving out. All of my children but the youngest pay their own fast offering now, yet we are still paying several $100s a month in fast offerings. We are at a place where, especially because of the cost of goods and groceries, we could really use some of that money. I feel incredibly guilty reducing the amount, though, because I don't want to do something wrong or be seen as not faithful enough. Those who are in a similar situation, how do you approach this? Tithing and fast offerings have always been important to me, and I absolutely see the windows of heaven opened. I'm just trying to figure out how to reconcile this with our change in circumstances. I remember my brother and sister-in-law doing something similar years ago. They came home from a stake conference and said that they'd been instructed to pay an amount of tithing that made their financial situation uncomfortable, so they doubled their fast offerings. I'm actually super happy without that added fee in my life, and I still donate my time and money all the time. Now let's go to KSL TV, where it says, a rendering of the future Latter-day Saint West Jordan Temple released Monday shows a white building with tall, rounded windows topped with a pyramid. That has got to be the strangest description I have ever heard for a spire or a steeple. I know it describes the shape, but still, a pyramid on top of a temple. Plans for the building include multiple stories and a total of 85,000 square feet, along with a new meeting house near the temple. The temple was announced 1 year ago in the April 2024 General Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, along with the Lehi, Utah Temple, which already has a public rendering. The West Jordan, Utah Temple will be built on a 16.10-acre location west of State Route 111 at approximately 7148 South. And this is the approximate area. Heaven forbid they just leave the land untouched and let people see that gorgeous mountain view. And now let's read this troubling post from a Facebook group for young women leaders that says, we would like to have an activity where the girls plan their future wedding. They would pick a picture of a dress, flowers, hairstyles, songs, etc. that they would choose to keep. However, I'm having a hard time finding bridal magazines with very many appropriate dress options. Anyone have resources for cheap, free bridal magazines that would have good options? I'm in Utah. I can think of about 1,000 important things that these girls could do to prepare themselves to become adults and be in relationships, but picking out a modest dress, it's not one of them. Last up today, let's read this great quote that says, the only person who gets to decide whether something was traumatic or hurtful is the one who experienced it. And that's your update for today, folks. I absolutely hope you have the day that you deserve.